Realization of cooperation. As the realization of a perfect cooperation in Him comes to us, there will come also the knowledge of our oneness with the creative force of the universe. Self-interest will be eliminated. Joy and happiness, found in service, will reign in our hearts. Our bodies and our minds will function more perfectly, because the creative force, which ever seeks expression in all, has been aroused in us. Understanding will come as quietly as the silent shadows of night, and His everlasting peace will live in our hearts. There is perhaps no better way to illustrate this realization than to quote a few of the experiences of those who have sought light and understanding through cooperation. In experiencing cooperation, I have been led into a greater field of spiritual understanding and realize that I am a channel through which His will may be done. I experienced in my trials a feeling of cooperation from our study group, in that through their prayers and meditations I realized that nothing but good could come to me. All fear was allayed. I knew that justice and mercy would prevail. There came to me a feeling of contentment, a willingness to leave all in His hands, and a realization that all was well. With the cooperation of our study group, I have been better able to understand my own individual purpose in relation to the whole purpose of life. At times, when our cooperation was greatest, I have been able to feel myself being a perfect channel through which God manifested. During the nights following such attunements, I have had visions and dreams that were testimonies to me of growth and development. I have realized that faithful repetition of efforts which make for cooperation brings at times a feeling of unity with all with whom I work, and a nearness of His presence, which shows that His promise, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them, is sure. In my meditation I have seen our study group come together and form a complete circle, each member of the group being represented by a dot. Each one in the circle seemed to call the others by name and bless them. The circle now turned to a wheel, the dots becoming spokes. Each spoke represented a member of the group. Each spoke became a channel, leading outward from the hub, where was seen the Christ light. As the blessings of love, harmony, peace, and understanding flowed from the Christ through the channels, the wheel was able to turn. This was cooperation in action. As the wheel revolved, members of the group or channels were able to turn other wheels, which were helping to bring the world to light, love, harmony, and true understanding. These are the goals for each of us to reach in our varied experiences: unity of purpose, oneness of mind, in that His will, not ours, nor our personalities, may be manifested in all that we do and teach. Let us be patient and untiring in seeking this cooperation, for we will be preparing ourselves to go on in the study and understanding of spiritual forces, and will become active channels for these higher forces. We will be better husbands, better wives, better neighbors, and better friends. The little world in which we live will be happier for our being a part of it. We will bring more joy and happiness to those about us and will be manifesting God's love for us. The way is being opened for all who will to have a part in the redemption of humanity. We must keep our hearts singing, not in sorrow but in gladness of purpose, for of all those chosen of Him we should be the happiest. May our united efforts go through the ages to those yet unborn, regenerating them to that awakening which makes all souls safe in the knowledge of Him who made all things, for without Him was not anything made that was made. Not my will but Thine, O Lord, be done in me and through me. Let me ever be a channel of blessings, today, now, to those that I contact in every way. Let my going in, my coming out be in accord with that Thou would have me do, and as the call comes, here am I, send me, use me. The first lesson for 6 months should be 1. Oneness of God, oneness of man's relation, oneness of force, oneness of time, oneness of purpose, oneness in every effort, oneness. Is there any spiritual advice I need at this time? The spiritual advice is innate within self. Arouse self to that being most helpful to others brings to self the greatest satisfaction, and most of all contentment, that I am a channel of blessing, through him, to my fellow man. In what does my greatest happiness and development lie? As indicated, in a service to thy fellow men through the abilities which are latent and that may be made manifest materially, if the spiritual attitude and aptitude is kept. How and where can I make contacts in carrying out my life work? Begin where thou art, using today those abilities in the various fields of activity to demonstrate the love of the Christ life that thou knowest innately within thee. But be joyous in all thou doest. Smile often, for smiling is catching, but sadness drives away. Will I be able to solve with such help all the continuous problems which seem to try, one after another, to put me out of business? If thy business is in keeping with that which is a manner of being of service to thy fellow man, ye will not be put out of business. If ye use spiritual guidance, spiritual direction, that ye may ensnare or use thy fellow man for thine own self-aggrandizement, thine own self-indulgencies, ye do so to thine own undoing. Let thy life and thy business, then, be such that is in keeping with that way in which ye serve a living God, and ye may be sure it has its place in his way with the world. How may I serve my boss better, in order for a better understanding? Serve in the manner as he has given thee, the master has given, not with an eye to service other than in the manners that are in keeping with the principles of the organization as to its service to the public, as it professes in itself to be. Know that life is not just all to live, but to make it, life, creative, as it of its nature is, and not in that of self-indulgence nor self-aggrandizement, for these only bring disappointments, heartaches, headaches. Only that which is eternal or creative in its motive, in its purpose, can be and is that which brings harmony, joy, and blessings. For deep and innate in self too oft ye find ye grow tired of whatever is happening and want change. Change comes soon enough, but it is self that ye must conquer. The spirit is willing, flesh is weak. Conquer ye in self the desire of personal aggrandizement, of self-exaltation, and let all ye do be done to the glory of God, and it will be to the honor of self. Not to honor self and glorify self, thus honoring God, but to the glory of God through him, who is able to make thee whole, who may, if ye will allow him to enter in, abide with thee. For as he has promised, what ye ask in my name, believing, ye have already, if thou hast then prepared thy mind, thy purpose, and thy ideal being correct, it is already thine. Use it to the glory of God, to the honor of self. Not as a boastful thing, for it is lent thee as thy life, as thy person, as thy beauty, as thy form, as thy mind, as thy body, to the glory of God, not to the gratifying of earthly appetites, but in beauty, in love, in harmony, in joy. These bring peace into thy soul, that brings harmony and joy into the life of all. Please give any further advice which would help me to better serve at this time. Know that the abilities, the possibilities, as well as opportunities, lie within thine own conscience and thine own self, as may be approached only through the spiritual purpose of the entity. Whether this applies to the spiritual, the mental, or the material life, know that all is one. For, as the spirit is one, so should thy purpose in body, in mind, in soul be one. As may be inferred, peace within self first must be found, which comes from the abiding faith in the universal consciousness or love as manifested by Jesus the Christ. This first applied in self, then in the associations with others, especially of those groups in those directions indicated, we will find harmony, a life experience which will bring not only a better place for others to live, but more harmony in self's own experience. For if ye would be the greater, ye will be the servant of all. This doesn't mean being the footpad. It means that ye offer that which ennoblesse in thy principles before thy fellow men, but if ye will look at it materially, it makes them beholden to thee. Any spiritual advice? Make the opportunities for an active service in keeping with the ideals of the spiritual life. A lot in a few words, but they should cover much for the body. Do keep that mental attitude of being not only good but good for something. Have a definite goal as a contribution not only to the pleasure of self but for someone else, or for several others, sometime each day. Think of others, for in the helping of others you will help yourself. Study to show thyself approved, then, a workman not ashamed in whatever field of service thou hast chosen or dost choose, but in those activities as indicated may the best service be rendered, and keep self unspotted from condemnation of self and thy fellow man. I have used service as love's symbol, but somewhere have missed. Where? Who is to find fault? He did not. He does not. He only gives, ever. Listen to that within, I will speak and direct the way. Reserve nothing within, as to purpose, as to individuality or as to personality, but wholly for love, for service. For, he that will be the greatest among you will be the servant of all. Service, then, as it should be in the experience of every soul, is the outlet through which the inner self may find the greater satisfaction. Keep ever that is of the constructive, that is, knowing there is much for thee to do as a witness for the creative forces, for God, for Christ. These ye manifest by thy relationships with thy fellow man. Be happy, be in that attitude of ever being helpful to others. These will bring that peace within that is the promise from him. Be helpful in thine hopefulness for self towards others, thus creating in self a proper mental balance. Make, then, thine experience worthwhile in that which may create or bring about in the experience of others helpful hopefulness in their experience, not as to material benefits, but that which arouses the spirit within each and every soul, the desire to do something for the other fellow. First, know thy ideal, spiritual, mental, material. And know that unless it is founded upon that which is eternal, it will fade and die away. Then, apply thyself in those directions as indicated, in ministering to the needs of others, and ye will find those blessings coming as have been indicated, in that, lo, I am with thee always, even unto the end of the world. Know that this means you, and thy ability to give to others the greater awakening as to his consciousness in their lives and their daily dealings with others. In the mental and the associations, the mental outlook on life, the attitude of life that the world and the conditions and surroundings are at an advariance to self is all wrong. Rather do something for the world, than having the world do something for you. Act in a way and manner as that a service to others will be the highest service as may be rendered for self. That held in the mental forces of the body as a grudge can only create poisons, can only create distrust, disruption, disorder, discouragement through the whole activities of self. Any other advice regarding any of these at this time? First, of course, is the health, then the purpose or ideal. And let more of this be set in the spiritual. Not as long-facedness, but as joyousness for a service well rendered, that there may be builded the better, the greater opportunities for the service to the fellow man. What should my next step be in order to be of service to one and meet my financial obligations? These become rather conflicting in their import, but know, O child of light, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. He knoweth what thou hast need of. Be willing to put thy service to thy fellow man, thy service in a commercial world, into his hand. For God alone giveth the true increase. Fear not, if ye are in the Lord's hands. Fear rather if ye have slipped from same. Please explain and clarify the karmic conditions which I should understand and meet, in order to be a better wife, mother, and friend, and fill more adequately my place in this work. There has been given those outlines as to the varied experiences that were held by the entity in the appearances, and associations with varied individuals that comprise the household in the present, and the activities of the mental body as related to those who only in part, or through other experiences, brought activities in their experience. Then, with that just given above, there may be seen the varying forces that produce karmic influence. But, that may be found in oneness with that of, He, God, is one, and making self in an at-one-ment, is not only denying any other influence but acting in the way knowing that he will bear thee up, and give his angels charge concerning thee in the way thou goest, lest thou dash thine self against a barrier. Then, when there arises those experiences where fear comes from faltering in self or another, force self, by will, I will, to give, live, and know that he doth all things well in and through the expression of the Father in every soul. Then may the body in the present, the body consciousness, the mental consciousness, have that peace that passeth understanding, that comes from an at-one-ment in the consciousness of his love dwelling within. What advice can you give me to doing something to earn money, as I have 4 families depending on my support? I worry and can't sleep over it. As we would find, from those activities where there have been the incomes, the helps, and the aids that have been given for others, from those characters and natures may there be expected to come resources to carry on. For that ye give of yourself in service to others, that ye retain. These come back to self, as in the sowing of good deeds. These are not as idle words, but if the service is given that ye may have good things only, you already have your reward. But in keeping in the helpfulness for others, in the activities in that direction may there come the greater service to self, to those dependent upon self. And ye know in whom ye have put thy trust, ye should know, ye do know. Ye have only lost thy hold, thy grip, by the things and for the things that are of the moment. For the earth is the Lord's. Trust rather in him. And as ye do to others may it be done to thee. Now as we find, in giving advice and counsel regarding the activities of this entity, many things are to be taken into consideration. Not those alone from the material angle. For unless there is peace and happiness in the service the entity has taken respecting its relationships to the individual and to the public, and unless such activities be prompted by higher or more constructive motives than material gains, little of peace and happiness may be the lot of the entity. For unless there is a service to the fellow man in bringing into the material experience relief from suffering, the aid to that of more hope and to a brighter outlook upon the experiences, such an activity becomes as very, very little of a glory or satisfaction even in the experience. It is not always necessarily those who are capable of bringing joy into the experience of others that are outwardly joyous, but the very nature, the very desire for that ability to do such may bring, under any circumstance, that of hopefulness, that seed of the spirit that is creative in its nature. For fortune and fame take wings and fly away, and only that ye give do ye possess. It is not what ye have accumulated that ye possess, but that ye build in the minds and hearts and souls of others, that indeed is thine. Then if ye would have friends, show thyself friendly, not in a manner as of material or only a social manner, but deeply. If ye would have love, show love. For these beget themselves. For what ye sow ye reap. Please guide me with information that will enable me to become of greater service to my fellow man. There's none better than we have given, and as may be followed by that which may be brought to the awareness of self through the practical application of those meditative forces that come by setting aside a definite time, a period during each day's activity when there will be the purifying of the body, as in accord with that which would make for consecrating of self in all of its efforts, all of its abilities, and entering into the Holy of Holies within self for that talk with thy God within thyself. These efforts on the part of any soul will bring those things that make for the greater peace and happiness and the abilities to meet those emergencies of every nature that arise within the physical and mental bodies of a living body. For then the God forces that are the creative energies of the soul mind will become the ruling forces in the life and in its activity in same, making for those abilities wherein any soul, any entity, may become the greater service, the greater factor in its associations with its fellow man. It is not how much one knows that counts, but how well one applies that it knows, in just being, doing, thinking, that which is pointed out to self through such constant, consistent, practical dependence upon the creative forces that have promised ever to meet one, every one, when sought. And there will come that which is for the greater development in the soul forces of such an one that seeks. Yes, we have the work of the glad helpers and the members present in this room. In the work in which these are engaged, there is a great deal more good being accomplished than is usually seen. Well, however, that they do not parade the good accomplished. Let this speak rather in the hearts and the lives of those that the group would aid. All will find, as they contribute of themselves in doing a service for their fellow man, that harmony and peace, which comes from the spirit of truth and life, as they manifest same in their own lives will be magnified in their activities, bringing joy.